We might think about being in a cabin with a thatched roof. Elders, children, people of all ages. No television, no internet, no Netflix. Just people sharing songs, sharing stories. And I'll invite you to turn off your devices. If I say Una, you say I, Una. Una.
I, Una.
And I might do the clap too. Why not? Do you hear?
We hear.
200 years ago and more, a drove of tinkers went their way of mending pots and thieving lambs along the road leading from the town of Donegal to Killybegs in the sea. And finding that they had one too many children for the caravan, they left it, newborn, upon a cabin doorsill. Now that cabin happened to belong to Conall and Bridget Haggerty. Now, Conall and Bridget had little desire for another child, for they had children aplenty their own. But what could they do? They couldn't very well leave the poor thing to die there on the doorstep. They couldn't toss it into the turf fire. And so Bridget, the mother, she made space for the wee child in the crib with her own. And in course of time, Bridget came to regard that child as her own. And as the years passed, Bridget, she fought the child's battles. When the neighbours would have cursed it as a tinker's child, 'twas a little girl. They named her Una. Una Haggerty. Una Haggerty.
Aye, Una Haggerty.
Oh, she grew into a sweet bit of a thing. Well-tempered she was. And Bridget, she did her best to get the lads to be courting her. Oh, she was forever pointing out Una's skill with the needle and the thread. Or pointing out at how soft her voice when she lilted an old Irish air. The fine way she had of making bannock, broth or jam. But for all that, the lads would have none of her. They kept the length of a cabin and the breadth of the road between themselves and Una Haggerty. Now, mind you, their feet might be itching to take her to a crossroads dance, their arms hungering to hold her. But the parents would have none of it. You'll not be marrying a tinker's child. You'll not be courting a tinker's child. And so Una, she never had opportunity to marry, to have children of her own, to have a cabin for her own keeping. Do you hear?
We hear.
Now, Conall and Bridget's lasses, they all grew up and married. But Una, she stayed behind to care for them, to watch over them through their sicknesses. And when Bridget got too old to be preparing the food, and to be willing to ease them gently like into their graves when their time had become. Now from the beginning, Una had a dream. Una!
Aye, Una.
She had a dream that having cared lovingly for the old, that maybe someone would be leaving her a cabin for her own keeping. But the mother, Bridget, she broke the dream at its beginning. The mother did, Bridget, before she died. Do you hear?
We hear.
For the mother, she says to Una, she says, now Una, as is tradition, the cabin will be going to Michael as he's the eldest. And I'm thinking that he and his young wife would not be wanting you. But I want you to go to the chest there and take your share of the linen. Who knows? But as no man would have you for his first wife, maybe upon losing his first wife, one will have you for his second, and I won't have you going to him empty-handed. No, I won't. Do you hear?
We hear.
Una Haggerty held fast to the dream. Despite the years, despite the heartaches. Now, those of you who are knowing Ireland and knowing the people of Donegal, you could follow the trail of her story. 'Tis simple enough. For as soon as one cabin was done with her, another would take her. So from the time when she left the Haggerty cabin, a young woman still, with strength to her body and laughter in her eyes, to that cold dark night when she walked out of the McManus's. The story runs thin as gossamer. Una Haggerty went wherever hunger or need abided. Do you hear?
We hear.
In a cabin where the mother was young, ailing after her firstborn, there you'd find Una, caring for that little one as if it were her own. In a cabin where the children had grown and gone dander enough to Belfast, Dublin or America and left the old ones behind, there you'd find Una, caring for the elders, as she had cared for Conal and Bridget, as she would have cared for her own parents had she ever known them. In a cabin where a man had lost his first wife and was ill-suited to care for the weans in the household. There Una was the happiest. She'd take over the brood like a mother. And she'd do her best to gentle the hurt that death had left behind. And for herself, she'd be renewing afresh the dream. But her birth, it went against her at every turn. As a tinker's child. As no man would have her for his first wife, none would take her for a second. And those she loved and those she cared for, they never knew of the hunger and the heartache within her. Do you hear?
We hear.
Now mind you, everyone that knew Una Haggerty blessed her name. And the stories of her have been kept green with love and memory in the 100 years since she's been gone from Carn-na-ween. And I will say this for the people of Donegal. Whenever she was leaving a cabin and going to the next one, until the very end, she was always offered something to take. So, in addition to the linen, she added crocks and creas and pots and even blue delf plates. And when she'd be changing from one cabin to another. For I tell you, as soon as one cabin was done with her, another was always ready for her. And as soon as she was going from one cabin to another, the men, women and children, they'd meet and they'd stop and have a shot of shoals with her, go blathering with her a bit. And as the years passed, she grew more and more bent. And her bundle grew larger and larger. And the men, women and children who ran into her, they'd start talking with her and they'd point to the bundle and they'd say, "Oh, Una, you'll be needing to get an oxen and cart to move that bundle to the next house. Indeed you will." And they'd laugh and Una'd laugh with them. Or they might say, "Oh, Una, darling, you'll be having to ask the Marquis himself to build ye a castle next to his own, for you'd be needing a fair-sized place to keep all of that you have." And again, they'd laugh. Do you hear?
We hear.
And Una, for her part, she'd laugh with them. But then she'd say, "Well, you know, I may someday yet be getting a cabin of me own, for my own keeping. Now, I'm not saying how, and I'm not saying when, but I may." And she'd nod her head in a knowing kind of way. And she'd look down her nose like she was looking down the path of the future, though she could see some future that the others only pretended to see. She was in the cabin of the McManuses when the Great Famine came. Do you hear?
We hear.
The corn blighted in the field. The potatoes rotted in the ground. There was neither food for man nor fodder for beast. Children starved at their mother's breast. And young men grew weak as children, dragging themselves out into the field, gnawing at the blistering grass, to die under a cruel droughting sun. At first, neighbour shared with neighbour, until death stalked them. And then it was every cabin for itself. Many a man sat the night with Fowling Priest across his knee, keeping guard over the last measure of meal in the bin or the last cow in the byre. And everywhere was heard crying and keening, the crying of the children in hunger, the keening of the old for the dead. Do you hear?
We hear.
By the time of the famine, Ona had grown so old that her years were beyond counting. Eh, Ona?
Aye, Una.
Speech was seldom coming to her now, and her eyes were a bit dim. Now, Una, though she was weak, she was worth the trouble of sheltering, for she ate little. And she milked and she churned, and she'd help the oldest lad to carry the creel to the bog, and she'd help with the cutting of the turf. And as I said afore, she ate little. So the McManuses, while there was food to be had, they thanked the Blessed Virgin Mary for another pair of hands to work, to help. But famine. Famine could put stone in the place where human hearts should be. And hunger can make tongues bitter. Do you hear?
We hear.
So winter came, with the cool, cruel winds. Harvest had come and gone, and there had been no harvest. And though her sight was dim, Ona could see the McManus children watching her with every spoonful of food she lifted to her mouth. And she could hear the mother's voice sharpen as she measured out the spoonfuls of stirabout into the bowls. She wished her ears were as dim as her eyes. And she tried to shut out the crying of the children. And she said to herself that she had earned the little bit of food that she ate to keep her body warm and going. She thought that until one night. Do you hear?
We hear.
One night she could stand the crying no longer. She was warming herself at the creepy near the turf fire. And she got up, and without saying a word, she began to gather her things into her bundle again. The McManuses were watching her, but they spoke not a word. At length she had gathered everything into her bundle. She had put her shawl over her drooped shoulders and was tying the bundle. And then she dragged that bundle over to the door. And as she lifted the latch, Una spoke. Do you hear?
We hear.
And she spoke and she said, now the house was quiet then now. The children, they had cried themselves to sleep with hunger, and it was just the Timothy McManus and the wife sitting there. And she looked and she said, I'll be on my way. You won't be wanting me the now. 'Tis God's truth. 'Twas the wife that said it. And Timothy, he touched the wife's hand. He said, oh dear, hush now. Are you forgetting what night it is? I am not forgetting what night it is, Timothy. It's Christmas Eve. But the old one there, she has not sense enough to understand my words, and she probably has not hearing enough to even hear them. And besides, in times such as these, there is not to put one night ahead of another. 'Twill be a curse on us the same if we let her go. 'Twill be a curse on her if she stays. Mary and Joseph, stay with all here this night, said Una as she lifted the latch. And they looked and they said, Mary and Joseph, go with you, Una. And Una Haggerty, on that Christmas Eve, went into the cold, dark night. Do you hear?
We hear.
She lifted that heavy bundle to her back. How she had sent for this, I cannot be telling you. But it comes though, sometimes. A strange and great strength to those who have borne much and have need to bear more. And she went walking with her bent back through the village. And she stopped. She stopped at each doorway. She could see the light from the turf fire within. Nearly every cabin she had lived in. Nearly every face she had studied long and hard. She made a blessing and a farewell at each cabin door. She went on, going up the steep hill towards Killybegs in the sea. She was beyond the houses now. Do you hear?
We hear.
And as she came up, she came to the bogland. Now in daylight, the bog goes on, beyond the vision. But at night, Una only sensed a levelling off. And she stumbled from the road and stumbled onto the border of the bog there. There's a thorn tree, and she set her bundle down and sat down to rest. Always I have liked it here, said Una. Many's a time I said to myself, Una, you should take the day home and go up the hill to this very spot underneath this thorn tree and spend a day listening to the birds singing, feeling the warmth of the sun on my cheek, and spending the day home watching the sun setting in the sea and watching the stars sparkling on the sea. Maybe hearing the fairy pipes. I never did it. I never had the day home. She spoke with a sort of a wonder. For you see, Una Haggerty had made up her mind. Una?
Aye, Una.
She had made up her mind that never again would she have man or woman offer food to her when it was needed for a young child. Too many times, Una had folded old tired hands. Too many times, she had closed old weary eyes. Not to know what a gentle companion death was to the old at the end. 'Tis a friend he is. 'Tis a friend will soon be coming for me. Wishfully. She fell into a kind of a sleep. She lost all track of time, all sense of space. And memories of the years, they started floating about like cards in a deck, so that she could hold them in her hands and she could pick out the memories that she liked the best. Oh, I remember as a child. The Shawnee came and he said that there was a fairy rath somewhere right here along the border of the bog. And he told us the story. He told us the story of Connell of 1,000 songs. For you know, they say that Connell, he slept on the fairy rath. They say that he slept on the fairy rath. It was a midsummer's eve. He slept on the rath, and when he woke in the morning, they say that he had the songs in his throat and in his heart, the songs of enchantment, and he shared them with the others all the rest of his days. And then there was Willie O'Donoghue. He was an old man when I was a girl. And Willie one night went walking through the bog. Was it any night though? No, 'twas May Eve, Bertina. And they say that Willie caught the fairy host. Well, it wasn't exactly that he caught the fairy host caught him. And he was obliged to ride through the night on that little horse with a back that was as hard and as thin as a hazel stick. Well, he had to ride the whole night through, they say. Oh, even myself, I oftentimes left a pig in the milk and a bowl of the syrup out on the doorstep of the houses where I live, for the good people. Aye, but we all did that. Oh, the people of Donegal, no. That the gentle people, they like the milk and the syrup out. We all left it out for them. It's been a long time since anyone's left out the milk and the syrup out for the fairies. If you've not got it for your own children, how can you give it to the sheep? I hope the famine has not touched them. I hope the fairies have not been starved off the face of the earth. Can you imagine what it would be to be a human and to have no sense of the fairies? Again, she started to fall into a sleep. She was beginning to be covered with snow, but she felt warm, comfortable. Oh, the snow. 'Twill be a white Christmas in the morn. And you know there's a saying in Donegal. If it be a white Christmas, they say that the fairies will come up out of the rad, just to behold the wonder of it. Oh, that's a good saying, isn't it? Do you hear?
We hear.
Oh, they'd make fine company, wouldn't they, girl? They'd make fine company for an old lady, a lonely old woman. Oh, I've been sitting so still all this time. I need to stretch out my legs. Well, she bent out her legs, and as she did so, she felt like she bumped something. And she reached out her hand. And she brought her hand to her face. And what did she hold? But one of the wee good people. He was looking upon her, but not saying a word. Oh, I'm awfully sorry there for knocking you over. Is there anything that you were wanting? Aye, Una Haggerty. We're wanting ye. Wanting me? Whatsoever for? There must be some mistake in it. Not at all, not at all. We're wanting ye, Tinker's child. And then she looked about her. And she saw there were hundreds of the wee creatures. All about her. And they were laughing. Laughing they were. Do you hear?
We hear.
Let me hear him laughing now. What? Oh, no, she looked at him and she goes, "What are you all laughing about? It's been a long time since I had me laughter on my own lips. I'd like to have a reason why." And one of them spoke up and he goes, "Well, we're laughing at you, Una Haggerty. Tinker's child, living your life in other people's cabins, caring for him, nursing him, nurturing him, feeding him, from birth to death and death again. and never a cabin for your own keeping." Aye, 'tis true enough, but I don't see the humour in that. Do you hear?
We hear.
And one of the ferrymen said to him, "Hey, ferryman."
Aye, ferryman.
"'Tis true no longer." Una, rest ye the while there. It was like some sort of a command. She could not help herself, but she had to close her eyes and sit back and rest. But it was a light sleep, as thin as the snow that she lay upon. And she was able to have some awareness, some opening of her eyes here and there to see what was going on. And the wee ones, the ginger people, they were all rushing about here and there and this way and that. They appeared to be building a cabin. Do you hear?
We hear.
They were bringing stones and turf. They cut a roof tree and thatched it. They put in a chimney and windows and a door in the front and a door in the back. And as they worked, they sang. "'Tis a wee Christmas cabin we're building the night. Aye, we're building the night. The stones make the wall and the turf chinks it tight. Aye, the turf chinks it tight. We have thatch for the roof to keep sun out and rain. Ah, sun out and rain. And a fire on the hearth to burn out every pain. Aye, burn out every pain." The song went on and on. And Una could hardly tell where the song began and where the dream ended. She felt a tugging at her skirt. Wake up, ye Una Haggerty. 'Tis awake I am entirely, awake and asleep at the same moment in time. We'll have all your stuff brought in, and you can see that your cabin. My cabin? Do you hear?
We hear.
Well, the wee ferryman, they brought in the bundle, and Una came in after them, and she heard a strange sound. Oh. Till she realized it was herself expressing the wonderment entirely. And one of the ferrymen says, Una Haggerty, is it all to your liking? Well, there's the outshot bed and a fine oaken chest, just the right height. The creepy there by the turf fire, and the chintz at the window. I just meant to have that colour of green, with a touch of the sun and the burning turf in it. Oh, just let me get my bundle undone, and the treasures of a lifetime placed in their proper place. And the fairies helped her. They put the crocks and creels where they needed to be. They put the spoon hanging up there. Everything was put away, the rug and all the rest. And once more they said, is it all to your liking, Una Haggerty? The rug by the bed there. The spoon hanging, ready to be stirring the griddle bread. And the griddle ready to be making the bread. The sharp knife ready to be cutting it. And myself ready to be serving it. Oh, it's all to my liking. It's all that and more. And then Una Haggerty, she said something more. Do you hear?
We hear.
Una.
Aye, Una.
Now, good people, I'm not asking you. I'm not asking you why you have done this thing for me. And I'm not asking you how you have done it in just this one night. But I will venture to ask one more thing. I know that you come up out of the raft if it be a white Christmas. So I'm asking for each white Christmas, would you bring in those who are lost and lonely? Bringing them to me so that I could care for them, feed them, nurture them. And the fairy said, we will do that, Tinker's child. We will do that, Una Haggerty. We will do that. And like a mist, they were gone. And Una felt a great tiredness upon her. She banked the fire in the hearth, closed the chintz curtains at the window, got onto the outshot bed, pulled up the covers, and went to sleep. Do you hear?
We hear.
The next night, 'twas Christmas night. Christmas!
Aye, Christmas.
And Maggie, the middle child of the McManuses, she ran out of the home. She ran with the hunger, not knowing where she was going, just knowing that she needed to somehow stay that hunger. She went like a wee wild thing, moaning like a hurt creature. And she went running up the hill toward Killybegs in the sea. She was weak and she was stumbling. She stumbled off the road. She stumbled into the snow and she looked. Maggie looked up and she saw a cabin. Where there had never been a cabin before. She walked towards it. She saw it had a welcoming light and she lifted the latch and she stepped inside. Oh, Maggie, I've been waiting a lee long day for you. Come in and warm yourself. 'Twas the voice of Una Haggerty. But what a change to Una. Una bent down over the griddle bread. She was turning the griddle bread and Una Haggerty. She had grown young. Her eyes were like the blue thimbles of the fairies. Her hair was like the colour of ripening corn. Now, set yourself in the creepy there. I've got pratties on the boil and tea making on the hearth. You'll have plenty of food here. Maggie sat. Oh, don't worry, Maggie. You'll be getting your fill this like you're filling more. It'll be many a day before you know hunger again. Do you hear?
We hear.
Maggie McManus. She went back and she told all that she saw. And though the strictest search was made, no trace was found of Una Haggerty or that cabin. Half of Carn-na-ween searched up and down through that bogland throughout the year. But never did they find a trace of the cabin. Not until a white Christmas came round again. And Seamus McIntyre, the cobbler, died, leaving his poor wife Molly alone with none to care for her. They were coming to take her to the workhouse that Christmas Eve. But you know Molly? She went. And she took the road to Killybegs in the sea. And no one ever saw her again. Aye. That's just one story. But there's enough of them to be filling a book. I'll not be taking up your time with all of them. You could tell them amongst yourselves after. But this much I'll tell you. This much I'll tell you. That if it be a white Christmas, many's a time, people young and old will be lifting the latch of that wee ferry cabin in Carn-na-ween. The poor and the lonely, the tired and the hungry, the young and the old, the heartbroken. Una Haggerty will be keeping the griddle warm. She'll be keeping the kettle full. And she'll be keeping her arms open wide to the children and elders of half the world, if it be a white Christmas. Thank you very much.